There is something I have observed for many years, standing in front of thousands of people of all ages and all circumstances. It's not that they lack dreams. It's not that they lack effort. It's that they live for a very long time without ever stopping to ask themselves the right questions. They wake up every morning, go to work, stay busy, feel tired, year after year. And then one day they look back and ask themselves, why have I tried so hard and my life still hasn't changed? I want you to imagine this. A ship can have a very powerful engine and plenty of fuel. But if the rudder is just slightly off course, it will still travel very far just in the wrong direction. And the most dangerous part is that the captain doesn't even realize it because the ship is still moving. Human life is the same. We are not standing still. We are always busy. But being busy does not mean we are heading in the right direction. There was a period in my life when I was the same. I worked hard. I believed that if I just put in enough effort for long enough, the results would automatically come. But the money didn't come. My life didn't improve. And I didn't understand why. Until I realized a very uncomfortable truth. The problem wasn't the work I was doing, it was the questions I had never dared to ask myself. Because before your life changes, your way of thinking has to change. And before your way of thinking changes, you have to start asking questions that make it impossible for you to continue living the same way. In this video, I'm not bringing you more advice, more strategies, or more things to do. I just want to share with you two questions. Two very simple questions. But if you ask them honestly, they can change the entire way you see yourself, your discipline, and the life you are building every day. And you should stay until the end of the video, because the final question could completely change the way you see your life. Your life is the result of the questions you consistently avoid. There is an image that always returns to my mind whenever I think about human life. It is the image of someone who walks very far, walks for a very long time, yet has no idea where he is going. He walks every day, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. Sometimes he is tired, sometimes full of hope. But there is one thing he never does stop to ask. Which direction am I heading? Most people do not fail because they are lazy. They fail because they are too busy to reflect. They get caught up in the cycle of tasks to complete, responsibilities to carry, bills to pay. And then they confuse movement with progress. Life keeps flowing, days keep passing, but the direction is never examined. I have met many people like that. Office employees, small business owners, recent graduates, even people who already have money. They tell me they are doing their best, and I believe them. But when I ask deeper, when I ask, what principles are you living by? Or what kind of person are you becoming each day? Many people fall silent, not because they don't want to answer, but because they have never asked themselves that. There was a time in my life when I lived that way too. I thought that if I worked harder, if I endured longer, if I was patient enough, life would automatically change. I didn't ask questions. I just worked, and I worked a lot, but the results didn't come. Not because the world was unfair, but because I was letting my life drift on inertia. Then one day, I realized a truth that would not let me sleep peacefully. My life was being controlled by the questions I was afraid to ask. I avoided them because I knew that if I asked, I would have to face the answers. And if I faced the answers, I would have to change. Human beings are very good at avoidance. We avoid by staying busy, avoid by blaming, avoid by saying it's not the right time yet. But the truth is, life is not destroyed by big wrong decisions. It is eroded by thousands of days lived without the right questions to guide them. Imagine you are driving on a long road. If you don't know the destination, you can still drive for a very long time. But every gas station you stop at, every turn you take, every hour you spend could be taking you farther away from where you want to go. The question is not, are you driving, but do you know where you're going? I used to believe that success was the result of learning more skills, gaining more opportunities, meeting the right people. But then I realized that all of those things are secondary. The most decisive factor is the quality of the questions you ask yourself every day. Because questions determine focus, and focus determines action, and repeated action becomes your life. Many people ask me, how do you know if you're heading in the wrong direction? My answer is always very gentle. If many years pass and your life is not better, that is a sign that you have not questioned deeply enough. I'm not saying you must always have the answers. I'm just saying you must have the questions. Because the right question will not leave you alone. It will follow you into the morning, sit beside you in small decisions, and whisper to you when you are about to choose the easy path. There are questions that are very dangerous. Not dangerous because they are complex, but because they are so simple that they cannot be avoided. Questions like that do not allow you to continue living unconsciously. And when you begin to ask them, you will see something very clearly. Life does not need more motivation, it needs more awareness. I remember very clearly the moment I began to change. Not when I earned more money, not when I gained more knowledge, but when I stopped and asked myself, if I continue living like this, who will I become in 5 years? That question did not have a comfortable answer. But it was the first honest question I had ever asked myself. And from that point on, I understood this. Every major turning point in life begins with a small but right question. Not a question about the world, not a question about other people, but a question about yourself. If you have never stopped to ask, your life will keep running. But it will run on old habits, old fears, old convenient choices. And then one day you will look back and ask the most painful question. Why have I gone so far, yet not arrived where I wanted to be? That is why, before we talk about the 2 questions that can change your life, I want you to understand this. Without the right questions, there will be no right direction. And if you are ready to face yourself, the first question is waiting for you not to make you comfortable, but to wake you up. And that is when we step into the first question. What kind of person am I becoming each day? There is something I learned very early, but it took many years to truly understand. Life does not reward desire, it rewards the person you are becoming. You can desire many things: better income, a more comfortable life, respect, freedom, but desire does not determine results. What determines them is you. Imagine that you plant seeds in the ground every day. You do not stand there watching the tree grow hour by hour. You do not hear the roots spreading. But as each day passes, beneath that quiet surface, something is forming. And one day, you cannot deny the result. Human life is the same. Each day, you are planting seeds for the person you will become. The problem is, very few people stop to ask what seeds they are planting. When I was young, I used to ask many questions. But they were the wrong questions. I asked, how can I make more money? I asked, how can life be easier? I asked, how can I get results faster? I did not realize that all of those questions ignored one core element. Who am I in this equation? Then one day, I began asking a different question. A question that made it impossible for me to continue living the same way. What kind of person am I becoming each day? Not in the big moments, but in the small choices. When no one is watching, when no one is praising, when no one is checking. You see, people often evaluate themselves by their intentions, but life evaluates us by our character. You may have good intentions, but if each day you choose procrastination, choose comfort, choose to ignore discipline, then that is the person you are building. Not in the future, but right now. I have met people who told me they wanted a higher income, but when I observed their lives, I saw that they were not training discipline, not increasing their value, not taking responsibility for their time. They wanted the results of a mature person, yet they lived like someone avoiding responsibility. And that is not a money problem, it is a personal problem. Life has a very fair rule. It does not pay for desire, it pays for value. And value does not appear in a single day. It is formed through the way you think, the way you respond, the way you keep your word to yourself. Each time you do what you promised yourself, you are becoming a more trustworthy person. Each time you break that promise, you are teaching yourself that your words carry no weight. There is a mirror you look into every day. It is not hanging on the wall. It is not in the bathroom. It is the mirror of habit. It does not reflect your face, but the person you are becoming. And the frightening thing is, that mirror does not lie. It simply records quietly. I remember a time when I had to face myself very directly. I realized that I did not lack opportunities. I lacked inner discipline. I did not lack potential. I lacked a character that matched my goals. And that was the moment I understood that if I wanted a different life, I could not continue asking about results. I had to ask about the person. The question, what kind of person am I becoming each day, is not there to discourage you. It is there to awaken you. Because when you look directly at the person you are building, you will clearly see why life is returning what it is returning. Not as a punishment, but as honest feedback. Many people think success is something out there, a position, a number, a title. But I have learned that success happens inside before it appears outside. And if the inside does not change, even if the outside arrives, it will not stay. Ask yourself very quietly, when facing difficulty, am I becoming resilient or someone who complains? When no one forces me, am I becoming disciplined or someone who procrastinates? When given the choice between easy and right, what do I usually choose? I am not asking you to make you feel guilty. I am asking because life will ask you through results, and results do not lie. There is something I want you to remember very clearly. You cannot build a great life with a small version of yourself. Life will not lower its standards. It only waits for you to raise yours. The day I truly changed was not the day I set bigger goals. It was the day I decided to become someone worthy of those goals. I began paying attention to small things. I began keeping my word to myself. I began valuing discipline not because it was easy, but because I feared the cost of not having it. And when you start living with this question each day, something very strange will happen. You will no longer need so much motivation, because the person you are becoming will naturally pull you toward the right choices. But then, once you have looked directly at the person you are building, another question will appear, a question not about who you are, but about how you are living. And that is when we must face the second question, the question that separates discipline from convenience. Am I living by discipline or by convenience? There is a truth I learned not from books, but from my own mistakes. Life always requires a price. The question is not whether you will pay, but how you choose to pay. Pay with discipline today, or pay with regret tomorrow. Imagine two paths. One path is smooth, easy to walk, without bumps. You step onto it without much thought. The other path is steeper, requiring you to watch each step to keep your balance, to accept fatigue. Most people choose the first path, not because they are wrong, but because convenience always invites you softly. But there is something the smooth path does not tell you. It does not tell you that the longer you walk, the farther you move from where you want to be. It does not warn you that the price of indulgence will be collected one day, when you no longer have the strength to turn back. I used to live that way. I used to choose convenience over discipline. I postponed important tasks, telling myself I would do them tomorrow. I chose short-term comfort over long-term growth. And I did not realize that each time I chose convenience, I was signing a bill that would come due in the future. Discipline, on the other hand, never presents itself as attractive. It does not comfort you. It does not promise immediate pleasure. Discipline says only one very direct thing. If you do not do what needs to be done today, you will live with the consequences tomorrow. And because of that directness, many people avoid it. I remember once telling a friend that discipline is the highest form of freedom. He looked at me with confusion, because in many people's minds, discipline feels like a prison. But I learned that the absence of discipline is the real prison. It is the prison of procrastination, of bad habits, of repeated choices you no longer control. Life has a very strict way of teaching. It gives you two options, small daily discipline or large accumulated pain over time. And the irony is, small discipline can be avoided, but large pain cannot. I have met people in middle age who look back on their lives with tired eyes. Not because they did not try, but because they lived too long by convenience. They avoided difficult conversations. They postponed learning. They avoided responsibility to themselves. And then one day, life sent them a bill they were no longer able to pay. Convenience has a very dangerous trait. It does not hurt immediately. It invites you to rest a little longer, delay one more day, skip one more time. And each time, you think you are still fine. But life does not calculate by the day. It calculates by the year. Discipline is different. Discipline requires you to face discomfort now. It asks you to do what is right when no one forces you. It tests you in small moments, where there is no audience. And those moments are exactly where your character is formed. I once asked myself a very simple question, but one that was not easy to answer. If no one knew about this choice of mine, would I still choose what is right? That question strips away every outer layer. It does not allow you to live for image. It forces you to face your own inner standard. When you live by discipline, you do not have to fight yourself every day. You do not have to negotiate with procrastination. You do not have to bargain with bad habits. Because discipline has set a standard, and that standard does not change with emotion. There is something I want you to understand clearly. Discipline does not take away your joy, it protects your future. It does not make your life smaller. It makes you big enough to carry the life you desire. In contrast, convenience always promises short-term pleasure, but quietly drains your inner strength. It makes you accustomed to choosing easy. And when real challenges arrive, you no longer have the strength to face them. I have learned that every day you are voting for a certain life. Each time you choose discipline, you vote for a life with order, strength, and choice. Each time you choose convenience, you vote for a life driven by circumstances. And that vote, though small, accumulates. You may not see results immediately. No one may praise you. There may be no instant reward. But believe me, life is always watching. It remembers every small choice, every time you keep your word to yourself, every time you stand firm against the temptation of indulgence. The day I truly changed my relationship with discipline, I no longer saw it as an enemy. I saw it as a strict but loyal friend. A friend who does not say what I want to hear, but what I need to hear. And when you live long enough with discipline, something very strange will happen. Things that once felt difficult become natural. Choices that once required effort become habits. And you realize that freedom does not come from doing whatever you want, but from no longer being controlled by anything. When you have answered this question honestly, whether you are living by discipline or by convenience, you will begin to see a clearer picture, not only of your behavior, but of the direction of your entire life. And it is precisely at the intersection of these two questions, the person you are becoming and the way you choose each day, that a deep awakening begins to form. An awakening we will speak about next. When the person you are becoming meets the way you are living each day. There are truths that only reveal themselves when two right things meet. On their own, they are not strong enough. But when combined, they create an irreversible force. These two questions are the same. One question speaks about the person you are becoming. The other speaks about the way you choose each day. When they meet, you have nowhere left to hide. Think about a ship. The rudder determines direction. The engine determines speed. If you only have a powerful engine but the rudder is off, you will move very fast, but in the wrong direction. If you have the right rudder but a weak engine, you know where you want to go but do not have the strength to get there. The person you are becoming is the rudder. Discipline or convenience is the engine. Only when both align does your life truly change direction. I have met people who are very disciplined, yet they never ask themselves who they are becoming. They work hard, live by principles, but their goals are borrowed from others. They climb very high on a ladder that does not belong to them. And when they arrive, they feel empty. Discipline without direction leads to exhaustion. I have also met people who have deep self-awareness. They read, they reflect, they speak beautifully about life. But when it comes time to act, they choose convenience. They procrastinate, they compromise, they wait for inspiration. Awareness without discipline leads to regret. Life does not change just because you understand. It changes when the person you are becoming and the choices you repeat each day move in the same direction. I remember very clearly the period when these two things began to meet in my life. I no longer only asked myself what I wanted. I asked myself who I was becoming, and I no longer only knew what was right. I chose to do what was right, especially when no one was watching, not because I was stronger than others, but because I was tired of living misaligned with myself. There's a strange feeling when these two questions begin to walk with you. You become slower in decisions, but more certain. You say no more often to short-term comfort. You do not need anyone to push you, because your inner standard has been raised. At that point, life begins to respond differently. Not immediately, not loudly, but precisely. You gain more respect, not because you demand it, but because your character radiates trustworthiness. You gain more choices, not because of luck, but because you have become capable enough to have choices. Most importantly, you no longer live in contradiction. You no longer say one thing and do another. You no longer have to justify your own choices. Peace comes from living in alignment with the person you are building. Many people search for motivation. I do not believe in long-term motivation. I believe in consistency. When the person you are becoming aligns with the way you live each day, you do not need motivation to do what is right. What is right becomes the natural choice. I once asked myself, what allows someone to go far for many years without burning out? The answer is not ambition, not pressure. It is inner harmony. When you are not fighting yourself every day, you save an enormous amount of energy. These two questions, when asked regularly, create a powerful filter. Before every decision, whether small or large, you begin to hear them. Is this choice building the person I want to become? And am I choosing discipline or convenience? No complicated philosophy, just honesty. That honesty does not make life easier, but it makes life right. And right is always more sustainable than easy. There is something I want to say to you directly. If you continue living without letting these two questions guide you, your life will still move forward. You will still be busy. You will still try. But you may wake up after many years and realize that you have built a life that does not reflect who you truly are inside. But if you allow these two questions to walk with you, not once but every day, you will begin to notice subtle changes. The way you use your time, the way you respond to difficulty, the way you speak to yourself. And gradually, those inner changes will create a different life on the outside. Because in the end, life is not determined by one big moment, but by thousands of small moments where you choose to live in alignment with the person you are becoming. If these reflections are touching you, if you feel that you are not just listening but truly looking back at yourself, I invite you to join us by subscribing to the channel, not to watch more videos, but to be regularly reminded of important questions that help you live more consciously each day. The cost of not asking and the power of asking now. There is something I want you to understand clearly. because it silently determines many destinies. Life does not punish you for wrong answers, but for questions you never ask. Not because you chose the wrong path, but because you walked too long without stopping to ask where you were going. The word now in the title is not pressure, it is a warning, because people are very good at postponing important questions. We say, when I am less busy, when I am more stable, when I have more time. But the truth is, if you do not ask now, you will continue living by old momentum. And old momentum rarely takes you to a new life. I have seen it happen too many times. People do not collapse in a single day. They drift, very slowly, very quietly. They trade away a little at a time, a little discipline, a little honesty with themselves, a little inner standard. And then one day they wake up with a strange feeling, how did I get here? The cost of not asking does not come immediately. It accumulates. It comes in the form of regret, in the form of prolonged exhaustion, in the form of a life that looks fine on the outside but feels empty on the inside. And the most painful part is not failure, but realizing that you had many chances to change direction but did not stop long enough to ask. There is a moment I will never forget. I looked at my life and asked, if I continue living like this, who will I become? Not after 1 year, but after 5 years, 10 years. That question did not scare me because of the future. It scared me because that future was predictable if I did not change. And that is when I understood something important. The future is not a surprise, it is the result of momentum. If you do not intentionally interrupt that momentum with the right questions, you will be handed a future that is very consistent with the way you are living today. Asking now does not mean you must have perfect answers. It simply means you are brave enough to stop and be honest. Honest about the person you are becoming. Honest about the choices you are repeating. Honest about whether you are living by discipline or by convenience. I realize that the most dangerous moment is not when you fail, but when you feel fine. Fine enough not to change. Fine enough to keep postponing. Fine enough to live another year without asking a new question. And then 1 year becomes another, and fine becomes the greatest trap. These questions do not appear to make your life heavier. They appear to make it right. Because living right may be difficult at first, but living wrong will be difficult later. And life always charges a price, sooner or later, light or heavy, but never forgotten. I used to believe that big change required a big event. Now I know real change begins in a very quiet moment, when you sit alone and stop avoiding, stop blaming, stop telling comforting stories. It is just you and the truth. That truth may not be comfortable, but it is freeing. Because when you look directly at the truth, you reclaim your power to choose. And the power to choose is the foundation of freedom. Asking now also means accepting one thing. You are responsible for your life, not circumstances, not the past, not other people. Responsibility is not a burden, it is a privilege. Because only when you take responsibility do you gain the right to change. I am not afraid of people who do not yet know what they want. I am concerned about those who have never stopped to ask. Because not asking means letting life decide for you. And life does not care about your potential. It only responds to action and choice. You may think you still have plenty of time, and that may be true. But time does not automatically bring wisdom. Only reflection does. And reflection begins with a question. If you ask these questions today, you may not change everything immediately, but you will change direction. And direction is more important than speed. Moving slowly in the right direction is better than moving quickly in the wrong one. I have lived long enough to know that the best lives are not those without mistakes, but those that know when to stop, know when to ask, know when to adjust, know when to turn back if necessary. That is why these two questions matter so much. Not because they are clever, but because they do not allow you to continue living unconsciously. They bring you back to the driver's seat, not a passenger, not a victim, but the one responsible for your direction. If you are still listening to me now, perhaps it is because a part of you is ready. Ready to stop, ready to ask, ready to live differently, not louder, but more honestly. Because in the end, the question is not where life will take you. The question is, do you have the courage to ask and steer it in the direction you know is right starting now? Change the question, change your life. If you look back at the entire journey we have just walked through, you will see something very clear. Life does not change because you know more, but because you dare to ask more deeply. Those two seemingly simple questions, who am I becoming, and am I living by discipline or convenience, are actually two keys that open the door to awareness. When you ask the first question, you reclaim the power to shape the person you are building. When you ask the second question, you reclaim control over the choices that quietly guide your life each day. And when those two questions walk side by side, You no longer live by inertia, you begin to live with intention. I have learned that changing your thinking does not make life easier immediately. But it makes life right, and living right, even slowly, is always more sustainable than living fast in the wrong direction. Life responds very fairly. It gives you exactly what matches the person you become and the discipline you maintain. If there is one thing I hope you carry with you after this video, it is not emotion, but a new habit. The habit of asking yourself important questions, regularly, honestly, and without avoidance. Because each time you ask the right question, you adjust the rudder of your life just a little. If these reflections mean something to you, I invite you to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with someone you believe also needs to stop and ask themselves. Not to change them, but to remind them to awaken. And before you leave, I want to leave you with one question not to answer quickly, but to reflect on slowly. If you continue living as you are now, the person you will become in 5 years, is that someone you respect? I have always believed success is not something you pursue, it is something you attract by the person you become. I truly appreciate that you stayed until the end of this video.